Welcome to the Self Careapist Podcast. Join me, Lorain Moorehead, a licensed psychotherapist, clinical supervisor, and EMDR consultant, along with expert guests as we explore the approaches and modalities we've used and developed to support our clients' success. Our conversations and stories are designed to inspire new and seasoned clinicians to stay curious, prioritize self-care, and never stop learning. Today, we welcome Dr. Kiki Fehling, a licensed psychologist, writer, and Linehan board-certified expert in dialectical behavior therapy. Her specialties include suicide and self-harm, borderline personality disorder, and LGBTQ+ mental health. Passionate about the dissemination of evidence-based mental health information, Kiki regularly shares about DBT and other topics through her social media accounts at DBT-Kiki, as well as through her writing for Psychology Today and other outlets. She's also the author of Self-Directed DBT Skills, a 3-month workbook, as well as DBT Cards for Coping Skills, with another book on LGBTQ+ mental health planned for release in 2026. Today, Kiki highlights the 4 components that make up an adherent DBT program, describes the experiences reported by members of the LGBTQ+ community that can be served and supported with DBT, and provides language and strategies to assist with different common scenarios. She provides resources for getting started with integrating more DBT and for clinicians getting started sharing more information. All in all, this was such a fun conversation that I think is going to be informative for so many people. Welcome, Dr. Kiki Fehling.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm so excited to talk with you a little bit more too. So will you give us a little bit of background on how you got your start with DBT?
I am very fortunate because I was able to get training and education in DBT during graduate school, which I know is pretty rare for folks. So I went to Rutgers University, and I went there specifically because I wanted to work in research on helping folks with suicide and self-harm. And while I was there was another professor there, Dr. Shireen Rizvi, who is one of the students of Dr. Marsha Linehan, who's the creator of DBT. And so throughout almost my entire graduate school training at Rutgers, I was able to work with Shireen and get hands-on experience for learning DBT and providing DBT the whole time I was there. And so it was really special that right from the beginning, I got training in how to apply this therapy that then became my favorite thing of all the therapies I've learned. So from the very beginning of my time as a therapist, I've been very focused on DBT.
Yeah, it's so neat to hear because DBT, I think, can be a lot of learning. And so it's really neat to imagine that you had it woven throughout all of the training that you were doing in graduate school.
Yes, exactly. I can really appreciate now as a licensed therapist how hard it is to learn new modalities, how lucky I was to have that one-on-one training with Shireen at the time.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about how DBT works for people?
Yeah, sure. Dialectical Behavior Therapy, or DBT, was created to help folks. Originally, it was created to help people who were chronically suicidal and specifically struggling with the diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. And oh my gosh, there's so much that I'm sure we'll talk about, but really DBT is anchored around the idea that folks with BPD struggle in the specific types of ways they struggle because they don't have the knowledge and the skills to cope with the intense types of emotions that they feel. And so I provide that background because DBT is set up to specifically help folks with BPD or not, but people who significantly struggle with emotion dysregulation, both feeling intensely and then behaving impulsively because of those extreme emotions that they feel. So one unique thing of DBT is it's a very complex therapy that has 4 parts. So one part is individual therapy. It's weekly therapy, the way that most therapies are given, although there's some specific things that make it DBT within the individual sessions. Second part is that clients attend weekly DBT skills groups where they learn dozens of different DBT skills that help with emotion regulation, distress tolerance, mindfulness, and interpersonal effectiveness. And then they take those skills and learn how to apply them individually in their individual sessions. But then also a third part of DBT is phone coaching. So 24/7, as needed, clients can call their therapists and ask for help in applying the skills they're learning in therapy outside of session. So there's specific types of guidelines that therapists follow and that clients understand what phone coaching is for, but it is an as-needed 24/7 phone coaching. And then the fourth part of comprehensive DBT is consultation team, where therapists attend team meetings with other DBT therapists and talk about all of their DBT clients and make sure that they're providing adherent DBT. So really there's this community aspect of, we talk about it being a group or community of therapists providing DBT to a community of DBT clients. So it's really like to make sure that the therapist is feeling good about the work you're doing with clients. So all four of those parts are required to be DBT and all work towards helping the clients decrease those impulsive behaviors, work through self-harm and suicide, and learn how to cope with their intense emotions and then all the relationship and intrapersonal difficulties that intense emotions can bring.
Yeah. Something interesting about consultation teams, because I don't feel like people talk about those as much. I think that would be an aspect you might not even be aware was integrated into a strict DBT model, is that it almost seems like there's no real leader. Everyone shows up as a colleague in support of one another.
100%. And I think that played out even in my training at Rutgers, where Shireen was, this huge expert and our clinical supervisor. And yet she still brought, when she saw clients, the one time while I was with her, like she brought issues herself and asked us for feedback. It is very much a collaboration and community of people all working within the same model towards the same goal, helping one another. And it's incredibly important for the therapy working because it's a difficult therapy to provide, as you talked about, but also we're often helping people cope with some of like the hardest parts of life and the most difficult mental health struggles, addiction, suicide, PTSD, right? And so having that support system is really non-negotiable in some ways, I think, for providing useful DBT.
Yeah, I think that consultation team model could be so helpful. I feel like in the therapy provider landscape, people are almost moving away from that team atmosphere due to telehealth, due to having back-to-back appointments and then kind of getting on with the other things that they might be engaged in. And so I think I hear from people in the community that they have less and less support instead of more and more. So to hear that that is a requirement for those of you DBT certified people to get there really matters, I think.
Yeah, I think being on telehealth is really difficult, especially again when you're working with folks struggling with high risk behaviors, especially. And it's, I feel really lucky that it's kind of ingrained into the DBT model, because then you have other people who know that this is part of it and you come together and figure it out.
Yeah, when you were explaining the 4 different parts, I think one of the myths of DBT is that it's skills. And it is, of course, modules, but there's also that individual component that I think a lot of people don't know, that there's more to it than the skills training itself.
Yes, absolutely. I think there's a huge misconception. DBT skills are a huge part of DBT, to be clear. And some of the research that exists does show they could be like the most important part for some people, at least in DBT, for getting the benefit from DBT. And in my lived experience as a therapist, like a lot of the real work happens in individual, like one-on-one, and it's so much more than DBT skills. You have to figure out how can you help this person actually change what they're doing in their daily life when they've been overwhelmed by emotions for so long. And it is more complicated than just, throwing skills at it, even if the skills are indispensably helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. You've mentioned that the suicidality, the clients that are experiencing suicidal thoughts were one of the original populations that Linehan served to treat with the development of DBT. And you actually have a really neat use for DBT as well, in that you serve the LGBTQIA plus community with DBT.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, DBT was originally created to help with suicidal behaviors and BPD, but then has since been shown to be useful for anxiety, depression, substance use disorders, and PTSD. And these are the exact types of mental health difficulties, including suicidal thoughts and suicidal behaviors, that folks who are part of the LGBTQ community often experience because of the high rates of discrimination and oppression that they face because of their marginalized identities. And so DBT is really beautiful in the way that it helps with the exact type of mental problems that queer folks often struggle with, but then also it approaches mental health in a way that's so destigmatizing and recognizing the culture and the environment that the person is in. So it helps queer folks deal with the problems they're dealing with while still recognizing that, oh, this isn't my fault. Like, it's because of what I've been through that I'm having these difficulties. And it offers lots of solutions for how to continue to cope living in a world that is not the nicest to you because of your queer identity.
Yeah. Can you describe a few of the skills or modules that you find to be particularly effective with these concerns that you mentioned?
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, I would say literally all of the modules apply and help with queer folks.
Mm-hmm.
But so as I said, like, LGBTQ people are significantly likely to experience discrimination, to have anxiety around experiencing discrimination, and then to struggle with what we might call like internalized queerphobia, transphobia, homophobia, where they start to view themselves negatively because of the negative messages they hear from the culture around them. And so all of these areas, both experiencing minority stress and discrimination, and then worrying about experiencing minority stress, are triggers and things that can be really difficult to emotionally cope with. And so the skills that come from distress tolerance, which are created to help us tolerate distress and work through difficult emotions that come up because of painful things we experience in our lives, they offer concrete skills and tools that queer folks can use to cope with that kind of minority stress experience that they might be facing, depending on their identities and where they are more or less frequently. But then I think mindfulness skills are so useful too, because they offer a way in for queer people to really get to know themselves better. So mindfulness and DBT, we think about really broadly. It's not just meditation. It's like, what is happening here in this moment right now? And how can I bring my attention to it non-judgmentally and fully? And so what that on a concrete level involves us doing is like, what am I sensing right now? What am I hearing, seeing, tasting, smelling, feeling? And getting in touch with our internal sensations as well, of like, what do I like? What do I dislike? What feels good? What makes me upset? What makes me feel pleasure? And it lets queer people really get back in touch with that, especially if they've struggled with internalized queerphobia and they've started to dissociate or deny or self-invalidate their own queer passions and, queer desires. Mindfulness skills really offer a way to reconnect with that and to stop invalidating and self-stigmatizing and really see like the inner goodness that's there in all of us, but whether we're queer or not. So mindfulness skills are another really beautiful tool for queer people, I would say.
I think that distinction you made is really key, that it can be meditation and just on an everyday experiential level, it's attuning to your five senses in this moment, and non-judgmentally is a huge piece of DBT as well.
Right. So I did kind of throw that out there as a term that I think most people think about commonly on like a colloquial level, like be non-judgmental. But in DBT, we mean that in a pretty specific way of not like adding on meaning to something, like evaluating something as good or bad. And we all do this all of the time, to be clear, whether we have been taught this or not. Like brains just love putting things in categories. But there is a tendency for folks who struggle with mental health difficulties generally to see themselves as all good or all bad, or really struggle with shame or anger at other people as being all good or all bad. And honestly, I think this contributes to the polarization in today's world, seeing people judgmentally. But then for queer folks, because of that cultural messaging I mentioned of like, you know, there's a lot of people who grow up learning from their churches, their synagogues, their mosques, let alone just like their cultural communities around them, that being gay, being trans, being bi is not okay, that it's wrong, bad, immoral in some way. And so when a person hears that enough, they can start to believe it. And so catching on to the fact that like that is a judgment. And can we instead describe what's really just here, including within ourselves and what we're feeling as queer people? And so letting go of those judgments and just describing is super powerful in that way. And then even, as I said, like in the polarization, can we not demonize other people, no matter what they're saying or believing that we disagree with? Can we try to use behaviorally specific words to describe what's happening here so that we can all collaboratively problem solve and figure out how can we build a world that is actually more loving and just for everybody?
You make an excellent point that even when we're sometimes explaining what a describe skill would look like, it's really hard to separate that we're describing factually because it is so ingrained to describe. There's a person, she's being too loud, or she's wearing something that I don't prefer. And those are all judgmental descriptions. And so really peeling back the layers, do you have a way to really teach someone or an example of how you would use a describe skill that is strictly description and sticking to the fact?
I love that. So I would actually say that partly there, when you said like she's being too loud, that would be a judgment, right? Mm-hmm. Versus saying like, I don't like, now I forget what you said, but like, I don't like her shirt. That's not a judgment, right? Like you can have preferences, you can have likes, you can have desires. And so DBT also isn't asking you to stop having opinions, right? So that's a really good distinction that I often make for folks. So let's say you see somebody wearing an outfit that you think is ugly. Let's just go with that. Ugly, we would say, is a judgment. And so instead, I can behaviorally describe, I don't think that looks good. Although that doesn't look pleasing to me. That looks like it's a fashion from 10 years ago. That looks like it's uncomfortable. Like, I don't know. It would depend on like what it is that's making me think it's ugly, or like that doesn't look like the other types of things that I'm used to seeing other people wear. Could also what we mean by ugly, or I don't like that color, right? And so all of a sudden it's like, it's using non-judgmental language in this specific case, I guess, would just invite in that other people may feel differently. That person thinks their outfit is cool, maybe, and that's a judgment too, but like they like it and that's okay. So all of a sudden it like decreases the intensity of the emotional experience usually. And judgments often like create distance between us and other people, even when they're positive. And so using non-judgmental language helps us like navigate that.
Yeah, that's a great point. Anything about DBT that you'd like current clinicians to know about it, or that you feel you explain really well in a way that another clinician might appreciate having the language for?
Man, so maybe the thing I wish most therapists would know is like what the D in DBT means. And so dialectics, right, is this idea that two seemingly opposite things can be true at the same time. And the reason why I think this is so helpful for so many people, actually it's very related to polarization and judgment again, but we can get so stuck in intense thinking. We all do this, but we're more likely to fall prey to this if we struggle with emotions. But whenever you feel emotions intensely, any person, we're more likely then to think intense thoughts about ourselves, about other people, about the world. And dialectics brings in this idea that actually the way that we feel about ourselves when we're really happy about ourselves and love ourselves and think we're cool and sexy and all the positive things, that is true. Those things are true and okay and a part of our lived experience. And then all of the things that we think about ourselves when we're feeling the most shame, when we're angry, when we're disappointed in ourselves, when we think we're no good, bad, unlovable, like there's truth in those things too, but we're not all bad. That we are human that has flaws and then also has positive strengths. And dialectics are about figuring out what is true on either of these sides and bringing it together, letting go what's not true, and finding a place of more nuanced truth and reality, because we would argue from this philosophy that everything is nuanced. Everything is in the gray. Everything is in like the checkerboard rather than in the black and white. And this is not just about how we feel about ourselves. It's all things. And it's about finding the truth in this moment, recognizing that that's constantly changing too. That's a big part of it. And I think that it creates a lot of flexibility and movement to really look at the world and our difficulties that way, no matter what modality of therapy we're using.
There's such great language around the dialectic. I'm okay as I am, and I have room to grow, and there are things that I can be working on to improve.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. It's like one of the primary dialectical tensions of DBT, the tension and the balance between acceptance and change. And then specifically, I think you nailed it, honestly. But the language we often use in DBT is, I am doing the best that I can, and I need to be doing better, right? Like, I'm okay exactly as I am, and I still want to improve and to change both myself and the world around me. These two things can exist at the same time, and they don't negate each other. And like, that kind of is mind-blowing sometimes. It's like, how can these things be true, that I need to do better and I'm doing the best that I can? But it's so freeing and so empowering, actually.
Yeah, I think it's such an important place to receive clients from, knowing that everyone's doing the best that they can. And there's a certain acceptance, I think, with a DBT provider and their client, where the client really feels that difference when they start the program. There's a challenge. These are the expectations. And then there's and I accept you and who you are exactly as you are.
Yeah. And I think that's a big part of the training in DBT, what DBT therapists are constantly trying to embody, like practicing these skills ourselves of dialectics, of mindfulness, of self-acceptance, and of change. So bringing to the therapy, exactly, really holding the truth of not only is the client doing the best they can, we know they want to be doing better because that's why they came to therapy, but then also like, I'm doing the best I can as a therapist, and I'm not always going to be able to help people. And I still want to work to try to help them the best I can and do better at helping them. So it's a constant tension between the client and the therapist, and both doing the best they can, for sure.
And when Linehan was developing it, you explain this in your book, but she tried just the acceptance, and that wasn't quite enough. And then she tried just the challenge and the growth, and that alone wasn't quite doing the trick either.
Yes, absolutely. So, Dr. Linehan came to the field trying to help these suicidal folks who previously had not been helped by other therapies, or were kind of considered lost causes by a lot of folks in the field a few decades ago. And so I think that she originally came trying to do like cognitive behavioral therapy, very change-focused interventions with these suicidal, intensely emotional folks with BPD. And they said, hold the phone, like, stop. If you don't think I haven't tried everything, you don't understand. So get this change out of here. So she shifted. Yeah, it's really funny to think about. And she's an amazing storyteller. And then she said, like, okay, so she went super acceptance focused, very validation, all just like, yes, this is so hard. This is terrible. Your life is so painful. Yes, I get it. I get it. I get it. And they were like, what the heck? Like, are you gonna help me? Like, are you gonna help me change? You don't get how bad this is if you're just gonna keep saying you get it. So she was like, okay, I can't win, and found that it was both things that were necessary. How can we both communicate to somebody who's struggling and suffering so deeply that they need both of these things? That's the only way that you create movement and hope with folks who are in like the depths of emotional hell. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I do love that story. And you see that in DBT now. Just it's cognitive behavioral therapy, change focused skills, all of these motivational interviewing techniques like go, 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 change. But then constantly also mindfulness, acceptance, validation, be here now, this is okay. Like more spiritual, honestly. A lot of it's based in Zen Buddhism, and that's definitely in the therapy a lot, even though you don't have to be Buddhist to find DBT useful.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about too, those origins, and just how much she pulled from to develop such a robust model, and then how much testing went into actually determining whether people were experiencing the changes that she hoped to see.
Yeah, major, extensive randomized controlled trials for sure.
In looking back to the LGBTQ plus community, one of my favorite components of the individual pieces of DBT is the life worth living. Can you talk a little bit about how that guides your work with this community?
Yes, I agree. One of my favorite things about DBT as a therapy, and specifically individual, is like the entire goal of DBT is to build a life worth living. And that's something I often have to clarify to folks, because not only is DBT not only DBT skills, but DBT is also not a suicide prevention program. It's like a life worth living program, if you will. And so what that looks like on an individual level is at the start of therapy, you identify with folks, what is your life worth living? What are your biggest passions, your biggest dreams, your goals? Like, why are you in therapy, and how can I help you get to where you want to be in life to get the most joy that you can? And so it's a very collaborative conversation. You know, the therapist has the framework of DBT behind them and like the specific types of things that we're used to working on and DBT is good at helping with. But then it's all towards what the client specifically wants for themselves. And that idea is so cool and powerful in general, but for queer people, because again, LGBTQ folks are so often like fitting into a stereotypical like cis-het life path, like the expectation of who they're supposed to be, who they're supposed to love, how they're supposed to like act. That isn't what they want their lives to be because of their LGBTQ identities and various types of queer desires for like non-traditional kinship or ethical non-monogamy for some folks, just like doing things differently. And that's not true for everyone either. But the beautiful thing is like DBT comes in and says, what do you want? Like, regardless of what your family wants, what your culture wants, what you think you're supposed to want, what do you want? And then how can we help you get there? So I do love that too, for helping this community get back in touch with that and then build lives worth living, even in a world that is continuing to put pressure on them. How can they build and find joy that's queer and meaningful to them?
Yeah, whatever you envision, you have permission to envision it, and it's valid and will help you get there. Wherever your starting point is, even if it's small and not fully developed at this point, there's room for your vision.
Yeah, exactly. And I think because for a lot of folks, LGBTQ or not, who have been through trauma and chronic invalidation, it can be hard to dream. And you might not have really been given permission in that way before, as you say. So even that is just a skill that we can work on.
You had mentioned using distress tolerance earlier. Can you describe what a distress tolerance kit is and what might go into it?
Oh, yes. Distress tolerance kit is putting together in one place all the types of skills that you're learning in DBT or that you've used and learned before DBT to help you in moments of crisis. So the emotional crisis. And so the idea is one of the most difficult parts of learning skills is then actually using them in the moments when you need them, because it's when you're feeling 10 out of 10 emotional intensity. And that's exactly when it's hard to think clearly and remember things and like act the way that you want to act in your wise mind, in your like place of deepest wisdom and intuition. So when we are upset, when we're in crisis, when we're completely overwhelmed, it's so helpful to go to a kit or a place. This can be like a basket. It can be a drawer. It could be a note on your phone, kind of like a digital distress tolerance kit, where right there you have written down like a coping plan and then all of the like the actual concrete things you might use. So if you really love self-soothing through the sense of smell, maybe in your kit, in your basket or drawer, whatever it is, you have like incense that then you light up and you smell and that helps ground you. Or you have a quick freeze ice pack that then you use to help ground yourself in cold or regulate your nervous system. So it's a physical or digital place where you just like put it all together to make it so you don't have to think when you're overwhelmed. And then it makes it really easy to cope and actually use the skills that you want to use.
Yeah, I love that. Anything that helps eliminate that, okay, now what do I do and where do I find it? And it just helps it be a little bit more available can be so helpful, like you said, when your coping is feeling like it's really strained, your ability to cope.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can all relate to the idea of like when we're overwhelmed, that's exactly when we cannot figure out, like, remember the thing. Oh, what did my therapist say last week? Oh, yeah, no way.
Yeah, so true. One of my favorite skills or something that I find myself explaining very readily is opposite action. And I wondered if you could give an example. You'd mentioned that just the climate of the world and kind of the polarizing judgmental views that might contribute to feeling like I'm either here or here and there's no gray area. Can you maybe offer an idea about how to utilize opposite action when it comes to some of the stressors happening politically or in our social climate?
Yeah, sure. So first off, opposite action, for folks who are not familiar, is one of the skills from the emotion regulation module of DBT. And it's one of the skills designed to help people change how they're feeling or reduce emotions that they don't want to be feeling. And the way that opposite action works specifically is it's meant to be for emotions that are not helpful for us in the given moment. They either don't fit the facts, like they're triggered by inaccurate thoughts or trauma beliefs rather than like what is actually happening right now. Or they do fit the facts, but they just like acting on them might hurt us more than it will help us in terms of building our life worth living. So the basic idea is that when we feel emotions of any sort, they make us feel like doing something. Like when we're anxious, we feel like avoiding or running away. When we're sad, we often feel like isolating or like staying in bed all day.
Going in a dark room, listening to sad songs.
Right. And then when we're happy, we feel like, jumping for joy and sharing good news with people and connecting with people. Like emotions have a lot of utility, but sometimes they're not helpful. And in those cases, emotions can make us stay in that emotion. We have this phrase that emotions love themselves. So even like the depression example, like stay in the dark room and isolate, miss the dinner with your friends, get more lonely, like it can kind of feed itself and we can get stuck in that depression, like self-loving cycle. And so opposite action as a skill comes in to say, okay, this emotion is not helpful for me right now. It's causing me to do things that actually are making me more depressed. So let me act opposite to this emotional urge. And in this case, again, turn the light on or get out of bed or go out to eat dinner with your friends or anything that the depression isn't making you want to do. So much easier said than done, but incredibly powerful and honestly like life-changing for getting out of emotional stuck points and sticky cycles. So when it comes to the polarization in today's world, it would depend on like, what is the emotions that are coming up for you and are they helpful for you or not? So I think a really common one right now, for example, is just like anxiety about the world and like what is going to happen. And it can lead people to like doom scroll and read the news obsessively or like comment incredibly mean things to strangers on the internet, like none of which contribute to like helping the problem. So opposite action might be, putting the phone down, setting timers on the news that you read, or only like setting goals to only read the news at certain times of day. So we're not saying like give up and don't care and stop reading the news, but we want you to act opposite to some of the emotional urges that are not actually helping you, that are making you feel worse. So rather than like doom scrolling, go out in your community and do something about it, right? Like connect with people around you or volunteer and actually address the problem that's there versus getting stuck into the emotional sticky cycle. So that could be one way that it might look like.
Yeah, I think those are really great ideas for clinicians that are serving to support their clients too, because there is a piece of it where you get to engage in it, the engagement and the really noticing that emotion and really experiencing what is it and where it's coming from. Those are all really valid and valuable parts of an emotion. And then, which is why I feel like that timer example really points that out, that experience it, feel the feelings.
Mm-hmm.
That's all okay and it's all necessary and valid. And then when you get to the point where it's no longer helpful, where you're ready to start to decompress a little bit and move forward, then you'll know, okay, the timer rang. That means I've experienced it. I've gotten the news I needed, and now it's okay to do the opposite.
Yeah, beautifully said. And I think this is actually another wonderful example of the way the dialectics can show up, right? Like reading the news is helpful and maybe only to a certain point. Like reading the news when you're exhausted in bed at the end of the day, maybe that's not helpful anymore because it just makes you emotionally upset and then you can't go to sleep, right? So it's balancing like what is true and valid and real. And then what is invalid or unhelpful or not actually accurate the way that other things you're thinking are. So it's just constantly balancing what is actually effective and helpful for me right now in building that life worth living. It all comes back to that.
Yeah. There really is a self-exploration piece to a lot of this where you're learning what's my point when it's too much. It's almost an exciting thing to be invited to learn. That at first glance, it might feel like none of this is good. Get rid of all of it. And then in your self-exploration journey, it's like, actually, I do like to know. I don't like to be in the dark. There is some of this that actually does feel helpful. And then you get to kind of explore where are the limits of that positive or helpful feeling? And then how can I move into something different at that point?
I think you nailed it. That's so beautifully said. And the thing that, again, I just want to throw back out there as like a beauty of dialectical philosophy is change is constant. The thing that feels good for you and helpful for you today might not tomorrow or vice versa. And that's okay. So we get to learn about ourselves. We all live in families and systems and cultures that are constantly changing and impacting us. And it's okay for our limits to change too, and to just like be aware of that, self-explore, communicate that to the loved ones and the people around us who matter and need to know our limits, and recognize that that's a part of us, and that's okay for it to change.
Oh, I think that's really neat to be able to keep in mind that you can invite that change, however it might look, and it might be more frequent than you expected.
Yeah, I think this is a place that comes up a lot for people in terms of like work-life balance, quote unquote. Like it isn't 50-50 all of the time. It's constantly changing and you have different priorities at different times. I think this comes up for parents all of the time. Like how can I be the parent I want to be and be there for my kids and prioritize them while still doing the other things in my life that are important to me? And then how can I hold all of that in a non-judgmental, compassionate space? Yeah, it comes up in a lot of areas in life.
Hmm. I mentioned your book earlier because I just think it's so pretty. I love that it's blue. You don't see that very often. And I know you've developed a couple of other things too. So can you talk a little bit about your book, your card, some of the things you've developed and how you've seen them be integrated for people?
Yeah. Thank you so much. I can't take credit for the blue, but I agree. I love the color. And then my cards you can see in my background here are like this beautiful, like pastel rainbow. Yeah. Zeitgeist, my publisher, did an amazing job. But yes, the resources are this book, Self-Directed DBT Skills, which is a 3-month workbook that my co-author, Elliot Wiener, and I wrote, trying to get DBT skills out there in a more accessible way. So we wrote this book exactly like the way that we teach DBT skills in groups with people, and tried to communicate and set up the practices for each of the skills such that a person could do this on their own. It definitely is not DBT, and some folks will really benefit from finding a real DBT therapist, but a lot of people can't find DBT therapists. So that's why we wrote the book, to kind of make it more accessible and more affordable, because DBT can also be expensive. All therapy can. And then the deck that I mentioned is just a follow-up to that book. I got a lot of feedback from folks asking for, finding, even though we tried to write the book in a really concrete, simplified way, it's a lot. DBT is a lot. And so the cards were a way to break down each individual DBT skill and then some other DBT concepts into like 150 words or less, often like I do on social media, like describe something in 90 seconds for a reel, and try to just, again, offer a different way for folks who learn and practice differently. So these are DBT skills for coping cards, it's called. And again, really focused on Dr. Marsha Linehan's work and trying to describe it in language that I have found useful, and hopefully it can resonate and help some other people. And then I'm working on another book for LGBTQ mental health, but that won't come out until next year.
That's great. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
Because we do have a lot of, predominantly clinicians and therapists listening, can you speak to what your process, in case anyone else is hoping to develop something or write more, can you speak a little bit about how that journey came about for you and any maybe suggestions that you would have for someone who is wanting to pursue that?
Oh my gosh, I love that question, because yes, honestly, I think that we need more licensed mental health professionals like doing this thing that I'm now spending all of my time doing and I love. Basically, we don't have enough therapists and therapy. So we need to pursue non-traditional dissemination, like in the form of books, podcasts, cards, videos online, social media, all the things. So my gosh. I will say, at least right now, my limits are that as folks listen to this, if you want to reach out to me, please do on my website, kikifehling.com, or anywhere on social media. You can ask me questions and I'd be willing to give you some advice. But the really basic thing is like, just get out there. And that is so simplified, but like, try to write for Psychology Today, try to write on your own blog, start a social media, account and create videos. Thank you. Or like Substack is a new social media platform that's really writing based for folks who feel more comfortable with that than with video. Really just, it's very difficult, but you can also do this anonymously, putting information on the internet through social media or Substack or otherwise, just putting it out there. And you can see what works. And I say that because for me, a lot of the opportunities that I've been given have come from social media, of like being out there and being visible. People have reached out to me and it's created new collaborations. So it is tough to act opposite to shame and social anxiety and get out there and be present and be seen. But that is the short answer for like, if people want to get into this, is okay, then get into it.
I love that. I was cracking up a second ago, and I'll tell you why. You said something that reminded me. I set a word for my intention of the year, and I kept coming back to dissemination. And I was telling my friend, is there a word for dissemination that doesn't sound so like lurid? And And we decided no, but it's just funny because I love that you said that. I don't think we use that word enough.
Yeah, it's tough because like every time I say it, I'm like, do people, like normal people, like I mean that non-judgmentally, like people who haven't been to grad school, like, do they know what that word means? Like, I think so, but I don't know. It's a good word. It's what we're talking about. So.
Yeah, I love it. I was like, I want to get it on a necklace, but I feel like that might be pushing the limits of that word.
Yeah.
People might
funny.
think like
it's
artificial dissemination.
That is very funny. Yeah. Well, but then maybe that will make them ask you about it, and then you can talk about it.
Yeah, and then I'm achieving what I set out to do.
If you start your dissemination jewelry line, let me know. I'll buy something.
I love that. Okay, so is there anything, if we've inspired someone to look into DBT more today, can you give the clinicians an idea of where would be a good place to start or how to venture more into their journey?
Mm-hmm. So I will direct folks again to my website because I have a lot of this listed on there. So hopefully you can put it on the show notes or something. Like I provide a list of my favorite books, of my favorite online resources that are free, right? And this isn't just all my stuff, to be clear. So,
yeah, no.
But I think that getting your feet wet, if you will, with the DBT skills is a really nice place to start and an easier place to start. And then, reading the treatment manual that Dr. Marshall Linehan wrote for DBT is pretty heavy. And if you want to get into DBT, you do need to read it. But often reading the skills manual is easier for folks to read. Like there's a few intro chapters of the teaching manual specifically that can give a really solid overview of what is DBT if folks are willing to buy that book versus looking for resources online.
Yeah, those are great ideas.
Yeah. I'm like, what is the actual name of that book so people can look it up? But you can include it in the show notes too, I'm realizing. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll link everything that we talked about and anything you think of in the meantime too. So one final DBT question. I talk with my clients. I work with a lot of career folks and entrepreneurs, and really, I would say a lot of them would identify as perfectionists and over performers. And something that we talk about in my own little language a lot are that we have two buckets of coping skills. We have emotion focused and solution focused, and sometimes with my overproducers, they are so focused on those solutions that they're always thinking of them, even if it's well past the point of being effective. And, where I'm just kind of ruminating, but I've trained myself to feel like I'm solving something. Yeah. And I think there's some DBT language to describe that phenomenon to our client. I'm thinking it like coping ahead.
Yeah. So that's so interesting. I think there's a lot of things that could help in that kind of tension and difficulty. And cope ahead is definitely one of them. So cope ahead is another skill for emotion regulation that asks you to prepare ahead of time, cope ahead, for the exact types of issues that you know are common for you. So this can be just like, I know I have a really stressful project at work coming up, like that day that the deadline is happening, like is going to be stressful. How will I cope on that day specifically? But it also can be what you're describing, like, okay, I know that I get caught in rumination about perfectionism, about my job or this type of thing. So how can I cope with that specific moment? And so step one might be identifying, what does that look like for me? Like, what does that actually feel like? What do I do? What's happening around me so that you can catch it? And then when you catch it, what are the skills that you can use to help you get out of it? And that in this case, like you're describing, it might be coming into more emotion focused of somatic focuses or focusing on the body sensations, like where am I? How am I feeling? And getting out of that intellectualizing cycle. And that's where a lot of emotion, a lot of mindfulness skills can come in. But then the other skill that I'll just offer to folks to look into if this resonates with you is one So in DBT, we talk about wise mind a lot, but one specific type of wise mind is called skillful means. And I love this one because it's the integration of doing mind and being mind, where doing mind is goal-focused, productivity, perfectionistic, go, ambitious, and being mind is just being, is being present, is feeling what's here right now, is accepting what is. And our deepest wisdom and most fulfilling life is going to come from the integration of these things and learning how can I work towards goals, getting things I want, and being the successful person I want to be while still stopping to smell the roses right now. Like recognizing if I'm working, what is it for? Like to be present now and enjoy it. So I love that skill, and it's kind of an underutilized skill. So you'll have to like dig around on the internet to find some information about it. But skillful means, I think, is incredibly useful and helpful language for folks who struggle with this like perfectionism and do good, be good type of thing.
Awesome. I can't wait to go down that rabbit hole. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, just in closing, I have a couple questions I like to ask everybody. Number one, is there a self-care? We've kind of talked about quite a few of them, but is there a self-care technique that you tend to utilize or recommend to clients that you just come back to?
Yeah, I would say something we haven't talked about, which is really probably my biggest go-to, is the skill of self-validation. So validation is like the communication that your internal experiences make sense, that your emotions, that your struggles, that like it could be no other way. Like, of course you are feeling this way. Of course you struggle with this. Of course this is happening for you. That's validation. And self-validation is communicating that to yourself. And I think so often on a personal level, it helps me, like, of course I'm struggling with this. It makes perfect sense. I'm struggling with this. And so therefore, if it makes perfect sense that I'm struggling with this, what can I do to help myself? So coming back to that really basic self-validation is like the necessary foundation for then taking care of myself. But sometimes just self-validating alone is enough to like release that tension and that shame or that judgment or that stress that then is like exactly the self-care that I needed without doing anything else. So yeah, I love that skill.
That's great to hear. And then finally, is there anything you're consuming right now? Media, food, anything that you're enjoying right now?
Definitely. I feel like I did just watch something that I loved and I can't remember what it is because I finished it. What I will say is I have been reading very slowly a book that is continually feeding me, and it's called Queer Dharma. And so I haven't finished it yet, but it's written by a trans insight meditation teacher, and it's about compassion and acceptance and meditation and yoga and how can we be okay living in transphobic, homophobic, marginalized, polarized world. And that's been really nourishing for me lately.
Oh, that's great. I'll link that one too.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you so much for being here today. I really enjoyed this conversation. Here's a wealth of knowledge, and you have such a way with words.
Oh, thank you so much. No, thank you for having me. I really, really enjoyed this.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Self Careapist Podcast. If you did, please subscribe and feel free to leave a review. You can also follow along at the Self Careapist on Instagram or head to lorainmoorehead.com/podcast to grab a free copy of your own learning map worksheet to help track all of the tools and strategies you're interested in learning more about. See you next Wednesday.